nearly every month to answer any questions you may have. For those of you unfamiliar with my work, every year I read through every issue of every English language nutrition journal in the world. So busy folks like you don't have to. I then compile all the most interesting, most groundbreaking, most practical findings and new videos and articles I upload nearly every day to my nonprofit site, nutritionfacts.org. Everything on the website is free. There are no ads, no corporate sponsorship, strictly non-commercial, not selling anything. Just put it up as a public service, as a labor of love, as a tribute to my grandmother, whose own life was saved with evidence-based nutrition. All right, let's see what questions you have for me today. All right, first one is from Man Mango, who says, what food contains potassium apart from greens and bananas? What substitute for salt apart from miso? Is there a maximum daily limit? Oh, we got a whole bunch of questions from Man Mango. So potassium is found throughout the plant kingdom. The two, I actually have a kind of a humorous video talking about the banana stuff. Two best sources are greens and beans. So I believe beet greens, and I forget what kind of bean actually was the number one, but any kind of bean. So legumes and greens are really the best sources. We're really shooting for 4,700 milligrams. That's the recommended minimum. And guess how many people in the United States even reach the minimum potassium? 2%. 1 in 50. And so that's why it's critically important to eat healthy. And we probably evolved getting 10,000, maybe even 15,000 a day. Whereas we used to get a tiny little pinch of salt every day that is naturally found in Whole Foods. And now we get about 10 times what we were physiologically meant to be able to handle. So it's been reversed. We used to have high potassium, low sodium. Now it's switched. It's high sodium, low potassium, and that's wreaking all sorts of havoc in terms of high blood pressure, artery function in general, and increase in stomach cancer, and a whole bunch of things. So we need to increase our potassium, decrease our sodium. One way to do that, best way to do that is to eat healthy. Most salt is from processed foods, so cutting out processed foods and eating lots of whole healthy plant foods. But another substitute for salt is potassium chloride as opposed to sodium chloride. And so you reduce sodium by not using sodium. At the same time, you're increasing your potassium. And so, in fact, do I have some somewhere. I could show it to you. So for healthy people, there's basically no downside other than some things taste a little strange. If you use 100% potassium chloride, which is what I'd recommend, I have some videos coming up about this. I'm just trying to remember what the conclusion was. So some things taste great. So when I stopped using salt in the kitchen dining room and cut out processed foods, after a few weeks and my palate adjusted, everything was fine, with the exception of pesto. For some reason, pesto never tasted good without some kind of salty component. So I used to use miso, but I tried the potassium chloride stuff, and it was delicious. For pesto, in fact, I just had pesto yesterday, the day before, so I have the potassium chloride out. At the same time, I tried it on watermelon. I don't know if anyone's ever tried to salt their watermelon. In the Deep South, they often salt fruit to make it taste even sweeter. And I remember as a kid, I put salt in my watermelon. I was like, oh, wow, I'll try potassium. Oh, my God, I almost gagged. For some reason, I don't know, potassium chloride does not go good with watermelon. So, I don't know, it may be good with some things, other things. The concern about potassium chloride, the reason we don't hear much about it, is because it's concerned people with kidney failure. So if you have diabetes, for example, you should get your kidneys tested. If you're elderly, you should get your kidney tested first, just because potassium chloride is fine, but that's assuming that your kidneys can excrete potassium. If for some reason you have failing kidney function, actually build up too much potassium and experience something called hyperkalemia, and that's not good. So, but other than that, if your kidneys are fine, potassium chloride is another substitute for salt, like miso. And finally, is there a daily maximum limit for amylase? I'm sure there is, but it's never really been put to the test. So, but I would stick to small doses as has been used traditionally. Okay. Let's see what else. So now there's so many questions flowing through. I'm just going to pick at random and we will see what pops up. Okay, this is Rafal says, is it true that iron from plants is only absorbed in human body? No, iron from animals is absorbed. In fact, iron in animals, the heme form of iron, actually absorbed better than the non-heme iron found predominantly in plants. That's not necessarily a good thing. Iron is kind of a double-edged sword. So this is iron overload diseases like hemochromatosis. Actually, high iron stores associated with cancer and Alzheimer's, a whole bunch of things. And so we ideally, we want to have low stores of iron, but not too low that we become anemic. So have enough iron to make enough blood, but basically otherwise stay on the low side. And that's a matter of not taking iron supplements, not going out of weight, unless, of course, we are actually anemic. How do you become anemic? Typically through blood loss, not inadequate iron intake. You're losing too much blood, typically through one's monthly cycle. All right, next up, Stephanie says, if following all the advice in books and daily doesn't still struggling to lose weight, what is the lowest daily calorie intake that's safe for how long? I wrote a book for you, How Not to Diet. This whole second half of the book is for people that are eating healthy, still having a problem losing weight. And so I'd recommend those 21 tweaks. You can see the list for free, obviously, by getting the book to the library, or there's an app, Dr. Greger's Daily Dozen. You switch over to weight loss mode. There's not only the Daily Dozen, but also the 21 tweaks will come up, so you can just see what they are if you happen to be interested, and then you read more about it in the book. Lowest daily caloric intake. It's say, well, if you have excess body fat, there's really no lower limit. The limit is you're not getting enough nutrients. So, for example, if you're heavy enough, there was a case I talked about of someone who fasted, had 0 calories for over a year. It was like 392 days, I think. The Guinness record, 0 calories for 392 days. Of course, the only reason they didn't die is because they took a multivitamin. And so they didn't die of thiamine deficiency, die of scurvy, die of all sorts of other things. So it's really, but of course, the lower calories you eat, the more important it is to make those calories count by having very high nutrient density. So even though you're eating so much less food, you're still getting everything that you need. Violet Femme says, looks like Violet Femme is just responding to somebody. Michael Mitchell M says, underweight most of life, don't have big appetite. So many plant-based strategies to gain weight, especially for people who just have problem eating more. Well, so if you just don't want to eat a lot, then you have to make those foods count in terms of calorie density. I just talked about nutrient density. This is different. This is calories per unit volume or per unit weight. And so, indeed, if you're filling up your stomach with iceberg lettuce, you ain't gonna gain weight. And so, there are some calorically dense, healthy foods such as nuts, seeds, nut butters, dried fruit, smoothies. You could imagine some kind of like a trail mix kind of thing. Nuts, dried fruit, lots of calories in just a small space. That's why hikers love them so much. And so you could just be grazing throughout the day. You have a bowl right by your desk, and and you will get the calories you need. Although being underweight, I mean, not underweight, but being at the low end, what's now considered underweight? Well, not technically, but I think people would say, oh, you look skinny. Having a BMI between 20 and 22 is actually probably ideal in terms of longevity. So if you're in that range, I wouldn't try to gain more weight. I'd stick where you are. Are Malva leaves okay to eat in large amount? I don't know anything about Malva. I don't think I've even heard of Malva. I assume it's some kind of plant. Sorry, I can't tell you more. Hello from Jonathan. How do you recommend navigating supplements, multivitamins, protein powders? I'm not sure what to trust given the lax regulation. Absolutely. Well, certainly there's this regulation is indeed lax. I have a bunch of videos about that. So what protein powder to get? No protein powder. Why would anyone need protein powder? You get protein the same way you get carbs, same way you get fat from whole foods, ideally whole plant foods. And no reason to take a multivitamin. There are some things that people may need in supplement form. So, for example, vitamin D, if you're getting inadequate sunshine, vitamin B12, you're not eating vitamin B12 fortified foods. So how do you get supplements that aren't like contaminated with something or actually have what they say they have? Probably the best way to do it is to get one that is USP certified. So that's a third-party certification entity that makes sure that whatever says on the label is what is actually in the bottle. Doesn't mean it's good for you or anything. I mean, you could have USP certification of snake oil, but at least it would be actual snake oil at the dose that they say on the package. So it's kind of truth in advertising. All right, next up. Okay, what do I think about using sea moss? For what? Eating, presumably. I wonder if that is actually a generic term for a variety of sea vegetables, or maybe it's for a common sea vegetable. Some sea vegetables are actually too rich in arsenic, for example, like hijiki, or too rich in iodine, like kelp. And so normally you'd be like, what do you think about this vegetable? Well, if it's a vegetable, just eat it. But I don't know specifically about sea moss, unless it's just another name for something I have videos about. Okay, Gabriel. What can cause tingling sensation in a whole food plant-based diet besides B12 deficiency? I presume you mean tingling sensation kind of fingers and toes. That's a sign of typically a sign of peripheral neuropathy. Why? So if, let's say you have a problem with your nerves, why would it show up as tingling in your fingers and toes? Well, those are the longest nerves in your body. So the nerve in your toe actually goes all the way up to your spinal cord, from your toe all the way up to spinal cord. One nerve, like one long, skinny, teeny little string of spaghetti, but like almost microscopic, all the way up. Isn't that amazing? You think of cells as being microscopic. This cell is like, 3 feet long. So you can imagine if there's any problems with your nerves, those are the nerves that are going to really show it first, right? Is the ones that are so long and vulnerable. So you get this kind of that typical thing, but it can be caused of all sorts of things. There's all sorts of toxins, medications that can do it. And so you just really need to go to a neurologist, and they go through the differential diagnosis, all the various things that can cause it. There are other nutrition deficiencies that can do it. And you just, some heavy metal toxicities can do it. There's autoimmune diseases, all sorts of things. So you just got to get checked out. Okay, Kirsch 2000 says, with most restrictions relaxed in the UK, despite a high infection rate. So it was just like opening day on Monday, I think. Congratulations, UK. Or am I concerned about a highly vaccine-resistant SARS-CoV-2 variant forming due to a mostly vaccinated population? So I'm most concerned about the unvaccinated population because they can build up extremely high titers of the virus. That's probably where we got Delta. Came out of India when we had, millions of people infected. But the Delta is relatively vaccine resistant in terms of getting the infection, but in terms of hospitalization and death, we are still very much protected. That's why I encourage people to get vaccinated. Is it possible that there will be a variant that not only escapes the vaccine, but it's actually more virulent too? That's possible. In which case we will have to create new vaccines and not get or not get infected in the first place. For people who are lucky enough not to have to come in contact with people that are not forced to come in contact with people to put food on the table. Should there be an outbreak of something really serious, you can avoid becoming infected by avoid coming in contact or sharing air, essentially, with other people outside your household, so you won't become infected. That's the best way to do it, is to prevent it. But should there be something that escaped vaccines before we had a new one? Eric, how long to wait in between iron and tea consumption? If they must be consumed during the same meal, what should be consumed first? So we should try not to drink tea with our meals. Here I am telling people to drink lots of tea, but at the same time, it can interfere with iron absorption. And so I would encourage people to separate. It's more important that you, since food can stay in your stomach for a long time, if you had like an hour buffer, let's say, you would have the tea first, because the tea on an empty stomach would drain out of your stomach. And then by the time you ate food, there would be no food and tea to combine. However, if you ate food first, waited an hour, you still actually have food in your stomach after an hour, and solid food. And so then you could get that interaction, which could interfere with iron absorption. Okay, Clint P. Do I agree with Dr. Fuhrman that saturated fat gives benefit? What? Gives benefit of atherosclerosis, protecting artery walls from salt damage. Maybe vegans should be extra careful on salt intake. Okay, I'm all in favor of being careful about salt intake. I cannot imagine Dr. Fuhrman thinks that saturated fat is beneficial for one's arteries. So yeah, both salt and saturated fat, and trans fats and dietary cholesterol, all bad for your arteries. Number one cause of death in the industrialized world. Okay, Carmen says, can you recommend a food or diet to help with insulin resistance from PCOS when already at a healthy BMI, already vegan? Right. Okay. So then it would be a matter of whole foods. So getting rid of processed foods, getting rid of primarily because of saturated fat. We're going to decrease your insulin resistance by decreasing your saturated fat intake. Saturated fats from predominantly meat, dairy, and processed junk. So if you're vegan, you're not eating meat and dairy, but you can still eat processed junk like vegan meat and dairy, which has a lot of saturated fat, can increase your insulin resistance. Elliot says, the B12 taken in a fasted state affect the stomach lining? I don't know what you mean affect. It certainly doesn't adverse affect the stomach lining. Taking a B12 fasted state. Not sure what you're referring to, but it doesn't, for example, irritate the stomach or in any way adversely affect the stomach. Hello, says Taylor. What can my significant other do for acid reflux? He's taking medication now, and it's just getting worse. He is not open to a fully plant-based diet. That is unfortunate. But there is stuff here. Let me. Can I? I don't know if I could post it. I wonder if me posting a message would actually show up wherever you are. Let me see. Yeah, it doesn't look like it's showing up. Oh, well, maybe. Okay, so I just posted. Okay. So I just posted on YouTube and Facebook a little blurb on how you can decrease heartburn. It's basically just taken from my video. So if you just type in GERD, G-E-R-D, into nutritionfacts.org, it'll pull up. And so, yes, the plant-based diet would help, but also reducing fat intake, reducing intake of certain foods like peppermint and chocolate, etc., can help keep that lower esophageal sphincter closed. Happy to help. Okay, next up. Hello, says Anna. Thank you so much for the kind words. Oh, fantastic. Oh, wow, that's wonderful. There's nothing to see here other than I'm so glad, and let me know if you ever run into any problems. Okay, Liz says, does plant-based diet help anxiety? So we only have one interventional study on anxiety run out of University of Arizona that took people and randomized them to regular diet or diet. There's actually a third diet arm, if I remember, or there was a plant-based diet arm which removed meat and eggs. because they were concerned it was the arachidonic acid that's inflammatory, long chain omega-6 fatty acid found predominantly in chicken and eggs, but throughout animal products. And so it was like a lacto-vegan diet. That makes sense. And did get a significant decrease in anxiety. Now, this was in normal people, not people with like diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. But that's most people who are anxious. They don't actually have a psychological disorder. They just happen to be anxious. And so yes, so a plant-based diet has been shown to help. So it's not just on there's lots of cross-sectional studies where it shows that people who eat more plant-based have less anxiety, have better mood, less depression, etc. But you don't know which came first. Maybe people who are mentally healthy just go on to eat healthier. Rather than the other way around. Who needs comfort foods when you're already comforted, right? But we did have that interventional trial showed within 2 weeks significant improvement in mood. Okay, Eliza says, does MSM powder help against aging? Ooh, aging. Or is it harmful? Never heard of anyone using it for aging, but have heard it in use in relationship to arthritis. I have a chapter, Preserving Your Joints, in How Not to Age, where I'll be looking at the data on MSM. I have yet to do it, but that's on my outline for the book, which will be out December 2022. All right, James says, what are my thoughts on peanut butter powder in flavoring for smoothies if one is getting enough healthy fats throughout the day? Sounds delicious. I think a lot of the peanut butter powders on the market, however, have sugar in them. So you'd want to get straight peanut butter powder, basically just defatted peanuts. Of course, so the only issue would be AGEs, advanced glycation end products, because this is roasted peanut butter, defatted roasted peanut butter. If it wasn't, it probably wouldn't taste as good, right? It wouldn't have that kind of roasted peanutty flavor. But high fat, high protein foods exposed to high heat produce these glycotoxins, which aren't good for you. And so that's mostly animal foods. I think I did a list of the top 20 and how not to die. Yeah. And it was all like grilled hot dogs and chicken nuggets and kind of on down the list. But tofu, like Cajun blackened tofu or something, not a good idea, as well as nuts and seeds or window roasted. Have it like a tripling of AGE, still much lower than animal products, but as plant products go, it would be pretty high. So, so something better might be a raw almond butter or something, or one of the raw nut butters, just because then you get all the benefits of the nuts without the concerns about excess AGEs. Okay, Jesse has natural low HDL with a whole food plant-based diet, LDL and triglycerides plummeted, fantastic. But it talks about a triglyceride to HDL ratio. What's important number to track? LDL is the important number to track. We used to think HDL, so-called good cholesterol, was good and actually had benefits in terms of reducing disease risk. It turns out that is not the case, based on a whole range of evidence. Including drugs that raise HDL, which actually had to be stopped early because it was killing people. And probably most importantly, these so-called Mendelian randomization studies, where people who just genetically at birth, born with genes that give them kind of unnaturally elevated HDL throughout their entire lives, regardless of what they eat or how they live, do not actually have lower cardiovascular disease. However, those born with high LDL die early from cardiovascular disease, and those born with low LDL are protected from heart disease regardless of what they eat, proving that effectively proving, of course, there's actually real proving in terms of randomized controlled trials, but it's the best in terms you get for observational data, which show that LDL is actually a risk factor, not just a correlate. So, for example, I do a video talking about this HDL thing. It's one of my egg videos where something like having lots of tennis shoes in your house associated with better health. But that's not because gym shoes actually help your health directly. It's just a proxy for something like exercise, which actually does help your health. So, those people that who carry around cigarette lighters probably live shortened lives, but not because they're carrying around cigarette lighters. It's not a cause and effect, a causal risk factor. And similarly, HDL is not a causal protective factor for heart disease. So don't worry about your HDL. Worry about your LDL, and it's wonderful that they're down, and that's fantastic. Congratulations. Okay, Brad Aronson says, is my constant walking really beneficial? Studies say no. Better than sitting all day? Yes. Studies say walking is not beneficial. I've never seen such a study. In fact, walking is been shown is associated with longer lifespans and in a dose-dependent manner. Meaning, the more you walk, the better. And sitting all day, not good for you. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to be walking, but being active is indeed helpful. Okay, Zana says, hello, Zana. Do you have any dietary recommendations for people with chronic fatigue? About 9 years ago, I mentioned, any updates? So I have one video talking about about dark chocolate. I have not seen much. In fact, every time I do a literature review, go through the alphabet, and I look to see if there's anything new. Last time I checked, it was like 2 years ago. There wasn't anything, but doesn't mean there's some new stuff. So go to PubMed and type in chronic fatigue syndrome and diet and see if anything pops up. And if you can't get access to it, let me know, and I'll pull it for you. And if it's really could be helpful, I'll do a video about it. French Blue 8. Oh, looks like they're just responding to somebody. Alex F says that their liver enzymes 40 U's per liter, and lymphocytes, 48. Both are high. What can be done about this? This is connected to liver spots and face. No, liver spots don't have to actually have anything to do with liver. Maybe they have the same color of liver or something. But if you have high liver enzymes, what that means is that your liver cells are dying, spilling those enzymes into your bloodstream. That's why they can be picked up as high. And so you have to figure out why. And having high lymphocytes, having a high white count is a sign of some kind of infection or inflammation within the body. So maybe you have hepatitis. And so you should get, there's a whole panel of things that can cause hepatitis, including viruses and alcohol. And you should figure out what's inflaming your liver. Okay, Mark says LDL 100 indicator of familial heterozygous hyperlipidemia. Even vegan, meaning despite whole food plant-based diet, supplemented with, I've never heard of Nexlizet, cannot tolerate statins. Lupini beans, allegedly, are PCSK9 inhibitors. Same with Berberine. What about Earl Grey tea because of the bergamottin? LDL, I wouldn't consider a LDL of 100 be a genetic defect, but so first thing I would do is, there are certainly certain foods that can bring LDL down. In fact, they've been combined together in what's called a portfolio diet, which was pioneered by the University of Toronto by a very famous researcher. Which is a plant-based diet with specific foods that bring down your cholesterol. I would first turn to that before going to the other long list of things you can do to pull down your cholesterol more. Okay, what are my thoughts on? Says eats plants. Says, what are my thoughts on a raw fruitarian diet? I would recommend against a fruitarian diet. I would recommend eating lots of fruit and lots of raw foods, but no reason to cut out legumes. If you want to eat them raw, you can eat sprouted legumes. That's fine. But why would you cut out one of the healthiest foods on the planet? Okay. Is my video, Why Do We Age? In your video, Why Do We Age? Who compared the amount of leucine in meat to 100 apples or 4 cabbages? What about the leucine in tofu or beans where it's higher than vegetables? Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's just that was actually taken from the study, just to kind of give a sense of how crazy it is in terms of fruits and vegetables. And indeed, we should eat lots more fruits and vegetables. I will be doing comparison tables of both leucine and methionine. Anything else? At least those two, because leucine is a mTOR activator. So there'll be a whole chapter on mTOR, which is actually already done. I'm about 30% done with the book. Very excited. Of course, it took me over 100 days to do it, so it's going to be, I don't know from when I reach my deadline. But yeah, so I will probably, in my protein restriction chapter, probably talk about leucine, and I will go through all the food groups to give people a better sense. Okay, VAMC says, any product recommendation for B12 on Amazon? Well, if you can find a USP certified, it should be right on the bottle for B12. I think Kirkland brand has B12 that's USP certified. Then that would be, then you could just be more certain that it actually has the amount of B12 that it says in its thing. Oh my God, it's time to go. I got another webinar coming up. I just did a webinar on mycotoxins, on aflatoxin and ochratoxin, but the next webinar is on September 17th, talking about white potatoes. So just clear your schedule. Oh, don't worry about that URL. I don't think we actually have the thing up yet, but just put it in your calendars and make sure you're signed up at, signed up. There we go. Signed up. Subscribe to nutritionfacts.org newsletter, and we will tell you more details. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe, get vaccinated, and eat your vegetables.